Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to do-it-yourself LED garden star ball. So this is kind of a steampunk decoration for your outdoor garden, or I guess you could hang it inside, but then the LED wouldn't work with the one that I used. But anyways, I used a solar LED is what I mean. So here are a whole bunch of purchased stars that I bought. But first of all, I had to have a little hoop at the top of it to hold it together. Now, of course, you could take your own wire and form it in a circle and use it like a copper wire. But if you're not going to use copper wire to make it, and you buy one of these macrame dream catcher type hoops that you can get, on Amazon or any hobby store, you're going to have to wrap it in copper foil because you're going to want to be able to solder to it. And the hoops that you get are made of, I don't know, some kind of alloy, but you can't solder to them. So what I do is I use a piece of 3/32 inch foil, and I don't usually use my more expensive black backed copper foil. I use just some nice copper foil that's kind of inexpensive and works. You want to be able to have it pretty sticky, and what I'm doing right there is I was burnishing it. I was pushing it down so it's smooth. Now, you could use a macrame bought star if you wanted to, like that one that's there, but then you would have to foil that also. So what I decided to do was I used some 16 gauge copper wire and made my own star using a purchased macrame type star as a guide. So I used that star as a guide to make my star shape so it would be star shaped. Now, of course, you could draw your star or whatever shape you want to. You don't have to purchase a star if you don't want to. You could also find a star design like picture on the internet and then just enlarge it on a piece of paper and then print it off the size you want and use that as a form to form against, because I wanted to have each part of my star to be symmetrical. So that's why I wanted to start off with an actual star shape. Now I'm using this 16 gauge copper wire to I'm wrapping it around, and then I realized, I'm gonna have to have a little loop at the top to attach it to my solar LED light thingies. So instead of cutting this wire short, I think I'm just going to leave a little loop at the top, and I will use that little loop as something to attach my my lights to. So later on I had to add another loop to that one that I cut too short. But live and learn. So I'm using my regular pliers here and bending and twisting and forming the shape I want for that little attachment. See, that's my little LED, solar LED. These solar LED things are ones that you would attach to like a mason jar. Those are the ones that I bought. So I bought a bunch of them and I painted them black because they were copper. They were chrome colored, so not copper, but they were silver colored, and I wanted them black so they wouldn't take up a lot of interest. I wanted them to be kind of invisible once they were hung. I didn't want them to have different color because I'm going to end up using a copper patina on this, so it's basically going to be a copper motif. Yes, it's going to have some silver and gold because of the stars that I bought and I'm going to attach to it. So it's not going to be completely copper colored, but it's definitely not going to be, really bright chrome colored. So I decided I was going to, paint them black first. So all of the ones that I'm doing in this series are the same tops that I bought. I bought like a package of 12, and I painted them black so that they're just going to disappear. And I ended up drilling 4 holes or 3 holes, depending on what I'm making, into the top rim of these, and then I wired them on that way. And you saw that there was a little like coil of lights. Those are the little lights that come with it. And you just set the lights free, uncoil them, and then stick them inside your design, whatever design you end up doing. So here I am trying to form this star as best I can. Sometimes I make one section a little bit the wrong size, so then I have to flatten it out and bend it again. So yeah, it takes a little bit of time to get the right shape you want, but that's okay. So I was kind of like using my fingers as okay, this is about the length I want, and then using the pliers to bend a nice crease. When I'm done making all my stars sides, I then, as you can see, I attached them to my original circle. And this time I am keeping little loops so that I don't have to add little loops later. I always have to think about that. I have to leave something, either a hole, a gap, or make a little loop, because eventually I'm going to want to add the lights to it, and I need to be able to do that. I also need to be able to add some kind of handle to it, some kind of loop at the top to hang it from the tree. So you're going to want to make some kind of, you can leave like a gap between your designs and just kind of wire through that gap, or you can do what I'm doing here and add a little loopy guy. And then I added more wires as I went to try to continue the shape of the star. And I kept on trying to make it kind of star symmetrical, and adjust the pieces as I go. I mean, yeah, they're not perfect. And I guess if I did buy a bunch of those stars and wrap them in foil, like I've done in different projects, I did do a different star, and I'll list that earlier. But this one, I just decided to use wires that I just kind of used myself, and I did straighten them out as I went. Now these are all these different stars I bought from I got some from Temu, some from AliExpress, some from Amazon. I just wanted a whole bunch of alloy type stars that are usually meant to make like jewelry, like maybe earrings or little charms on something. But what I'm doing is I'm attaching stars to this, to my star. So my star is going to be full of stars. So I'm using some more wires, usually 22 gauge. Sometimes I'm using 16 gauge. 16 gauge is great. I mean, not 16. 26 gauge is great because it's really kind of thin and you can just wrap it around. But the sturdiness of the 22 gauge is something I thought would be good for this, because it was kind of hard to keep them in place at times. And I had to like wrap around the edges, because most of these stars had one loop. Okay, so they were, to hang for earrings or something. They only had a loop on one side. And unless they were hollow and I could just kind of go through the hollowness of them, it was kind of tricky to make the rest of the star stay where it was. Now, granted, I knew that when see, I'm kind of like trying to hold that point of the star together. So when I solder these, they will be more secure. And, frankly, I don't mind if some of them twist a little bit and aren't, perfectly where I originally envisioned, because this is basically going to be a star full of stars, and it's okay if they're twisted. But see, I kind of wanted that star like that. So that's what I hoped. Now, when I started putting the stars on, I kind of just looped on some wire for a star, and then I would cut the wire so I wouldn't have, all this extra wire all over the place. But then I'd have to start with a whole nother wire. So what I ended up doing was just, starting off with a pretty long piece of copper wire, and then just after I looped it on, just keep the wire there, and I would use that wire to attach the next one. And of course, this made for a very wiry, confusing look at one point, but I had faith that this would work. Now, the trickiest thing is to try to figure out where you're going to put what star. I didn't want to have two stars that were too similar next to each other. And I had some really big stars like I tried to use a minute ago, and there weren't that many gaps that were actually that big that I could put that star, so I only used a couple in this. And sometimes I would start putting one on and then say, oh no, that just doesn't look right. And then I would take it off and put a different one on. But as you can see, like this little gold star is just going to be right. Now I did try to buy mainly silver coated stars so they would all be pretty much the same. But I knew that once I put my patina on them, different metals would react to the patina differently than others. So I'm going to try to cover the majority of it with solder. But of course, if you have a silver object and you're trying to put silver solder on it, that you're not really going to be able to tell if it's perfectly covered. So I know that that's going to be an issue, but it's okay if little bits of the chrome colored or the gold colored stars end up showing through when I'm done, because that's okay. It's a kind of a twinkly star look, and at night it's going to be just kind of a ball of starry shapes. And I have a picture of that to show you when I'm done. And it was in the first clip, showed different, what it looked like in the day and what it looked like at night. So you can see that there are just so many different shaped stars. And I wanted to have as many different shapes as possible. So some of these groups that I bought, of course, I didn't want to spend, any more money than I needed to. So I looked for, variety of the stars, and I wanted to, get a nice amount. I wanted, like at least 20 in a bunch, and I didn't want to spend, too much for them. So I kept looking at how much these things cost and then bought accordingly. Right now I'm putting on some nice gel flux, and I'm using a silicone probe right there to just kind of set that guy where I want to. That guy ended up being kind of problematic. I'm dropping solder on top of things, and I learned that my solder iron tip is just getting too old. It's just not working that well. Even when I clean it, even when there's fresh flux, it's just not really heating up very well. I turned the temperature up higher than I've ever had to have it, so it's around 500 degrees, which I usually use less, and it just didn't really work all that well. So I did order another one, but at this point I don't have my new one, so I'm using my old knit tip because that's what I have. So I'm putting my gel flux on. I like gel flux because it doesn't like drip all over the place like liquid flux does, and it also you don't have to scrub it on as much as the paste stuff. So I use the gel, which is kind of a compromise between the two, and I really like it. And what I'm trying to do is I put the flux on the whole thing, and I'm trying to heat up the area enough so that the solder will go from the top of the wire and go wrap around the whole wire, so the inside's going to be the same color. Now that's okay if the inside ends up being not solidly soldered. I can deal with that. I'm not going to back solder everything. I'll probably look inside and try to back solder some stuff as I go, but I'm not going to be overly worried if every inch is not covered with the solder, like I said earlier. So you spread on the flux and then heat up the wire as you go. Because it's pure bare copper, all these wires are, the copper wire is going to just suck up that solder really easily. What doesn't want to accept solder as much are the stars, because the stars are made of alloy metals of different types, and they just are not going to accept the solder, which is why I wire on all of these instead of just trying to solder them on individually. I attach the wires also to give them extra support, and they will accept the solder more because they will accept the solder where they're wired on, because the solder's like, the copper's like right there. So it'll help heat up and make the wire, make everything accept the solder. So this is kind of a, as I said before, it's like a little steampunk version of a star. So it's kind of metal, mechanical type of look. And here I am soldering some more areas. Most of this video I have at 4 times normal life. I mean, you could slow it down if you want to view stuff, but I don't want it to be, really slow, because it is kind of repetitive when you're adding solder to things. I'm, like right now, that's wiping off my tip to try to get it to be cleaner. And I'm using globs of solder that are on the table at times. I'm using, used solder, that have dripped off. And sometimes I'm using brand new pieces of solder. So do not throw away, your little globs of solder that fall off your projects. Don't throw those away. They're very, very useful. You can use them again. I have another video where I made a silicone mold and remelted lots of little globs of solder into a longer coil form so that it's easier to use. So if I have a big glob of solder, I sometimes pick them up with my tweezers and just hold them that way to melt onto my project. See, there's a big glob down there that you just saw. So I'm not going to show you every single bit of solder that I put on this. So I'm just like showing you some. So I'm heating up different areas. There's a little star right there. And just hold your iron with flux underneath it right to the metal, and it will suck it up. Now, one thing about these pieces of metal that, you alloy shapes that you buy, some of them will fall apart with too much heat. So I have had that happen. So, that's like a startlement when you're heating it up to put solder on it, and all of a sudden a part falls off. So, be aware that that may happen, and oh well, I guess I won't use that part. And you may have to take off a section and then put on something else. So that's, understandable. So here is my star, and I am now misting it with copper patina. Now, you don't have to use a squirt bottle. You could brush the whole thing on with a paintbrush or with an old toothbrush. I usually like to mist it, and I'm outside. I don't want to breathe this stuff in. Patina is really bad for you. And I'm going to mist it from different directions. As you can see, it's misted, but there are sections that are not going to accept the patina because I didn't put solder on them. So yeah, I could go back in the solder room and put more solder on it, but I like it the way it is. This is what it looked like at night. It's very, very bright and shiny and very pretty. I was very happy with the look. And thank you for watching, and have fun with your next project.